Okay, cool. So we have half an hour, and I'm going to respect everybody's time here. And what I wanted to do here was talk a little bit about the Zoe project and customer success stories with Zoe, okay? So the first thing I want to say is none of the customers I mentioned by name have endorsed Zoe. They haven't publicly said anything about Zoe being part of their strategy, blah, 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 right? So I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to find these customers afterwards saying, you didn't have permission to mention my name. The customers who I will mention by name, however, I do have permission to mention their name. Okay, so there'll be other customers I'll mention, and I'll kind of say what geography they are and what industry they are and things like that, but I haven't specifically got. And try not to reverse engineer who the customer is if you see a chart and you go, oh, I know that customer. Otherwise, I might get in trouble. So the first thing, John Mertic mentioned this in the keynote about Zoe. I'm part of Zoe project, very, very proud. The proudest thing about Zoe is that he mentioned the number of vendors that are included with Zoe. So it's a phenomenal project. A huge number of Broadcom folks are here as well. Rocket's a very key participant. I was very fortunate. I visited them in Waltham yesterday with Jakob. John Mertic called out 6 vendors that extend Zoe. I think it's actually about 9. But it's a very high number. So we're very, very proud of Zoe. It's actually the 5th open source project that I've personally worked on. I work for IBM. I have the luckiest job in the world because I say I get paid by IBM, but I just do cool stuff on behalf of customers. And they keep paying me, so I'm very happy about that. What I'm going to do today is try and show to you. So Zoe has this. I think this is slightly out of date, actually. It might be like a week old, so the numbers have gone up. I'm going to focus on 3 components in Zoe. We have 153,000 downloads of our command line interface. I'm going to talk about that. We have something called the Zoe Explorer in Visual Studio Code. We have about 66,000 downloads. I'll talk about the customers who use that and why. And I'm going to talk about our ZOS component. There's a lot more to Zoe. I could talk all day about Zoe, but I'm going to focus on these 3. And first thing I'll talk about Zoe. Zoe is really, when we started Zoe, it had these 3 taglines of open, simple, and familiar. And we try and weave those into everything we do with Zoe. Basically, it's so that this person on the left, sitting at their laptop, can connect to the thing on the right, left, which is the mainframe, which is our 58-year-old mainframe platform. And how do we do that? Now, there's lots of different ways that Zoe lets you do that, but remember the 3 I'm going to focus on: command line interface, Visual Studio Code, and then our ZOS component. So the first thing is, how would you naturally interact with any computer that you were talking to? You have a number of ways open, but the way that you or I probably interact with a laptop computer is we open up a terminal, we open up a shell, and we type commands. We open up a command prompt in Windows, cmd.exe, and we start doing stuff. We type ls, cd, pwd. Right, we have muscle memory. We can always open GUIs, rich GUIs, but there's something nice and powerful about writing, just typing in commands and having the machine do things for you. So examples of this, sometimes when I talk about the command line interface, people get upset. They say, command line interface, it feels like you've just gotten a time machine or a telephone box and gone back 60 years, and we can do that with the mainframe with TSO. But the point is, even something like Git, that's a very modern collaboration tool for doing projects and stuff, Git has a command line, and most people here that use Git probably use the Git command line. Okay, Docker has a Docker command line. So it makes sense for the mainframe to have a mainframe command line that allows you off-platform, without having to SSH into the machine, do things to the machine. And if you look at these 2 command lines, when you type the word Git, it tells you all of the commands you can do with Git. When you type the word Docker, it tells you the commands you can do with Docker. So they're sort of self-describing command lines. Now, the first customer I'm going to talk about is Lloyds Banking Group. They're a very, very large banking group in the UK. And this is a little video clip that we were having some audio problems playing, but I'm going to play. This is a very common use case I see with customers, and this is Stephen Westwood. He's about my age, actually, and he's an IT operations manager at Lloyds Bank. And I'm going to see if I can get the video to play, just because it's more effective when you hear him. By the way, this video was featured at IBM Z Day last week. So let's see. First of all, let's see if the video plays. No, it doesn't. Sorry about this. Okay, I'm going to go back one more. Sorry about this. I did get to the room early to try and rehearse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my mic here and then hit play.
Anything we could to be more accessible to new people, new colleagues on the platform.
Can you hear that?
Always have got a great apprentice scheme.
I'm going to have one more go.
We're going to try to plug you in this way.
Are you sure, guys?
Do you have a headphone?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
We can do this.
Hey, no worries. Sorry about that. Oh, wow.
Sorry about that. So yeah, you can plug in here.
Don't start filling in your feedback sessions yet. Rose, she's there with her pen and the paper, like, can't believe this. Here we go. I just wanted to, I can always talk without having these customer, but I think it's much better if I hear the customer stories first. Okay, let's kick it.
Coming up, we're just going to test the audio. You should be getting it there.
It's worth waiting for. Cool, we got some sound. Okay, so here's Stephen talking about his first experience with a command line interface. I want you to hear this.
Accessible to new people, newer colleagues on the platform that we're getting. Always have got a great apprentice scheme. We'll get some new people on board. I'm not being funny, but when you see a TM3270 session for the first time, they're kind of like, what the heck is this? So could we bring something a bit more modern to them? And there was already a few people within the organisation who were looking at Zoe CLI. And I thought, and I did some reading up on that and in terms of presentations. I thought it looked quite interesting. So I felt like that could be one thing that I could look at that might be able to bring some value to the platform.
So there's Stephen Westwood. We're talking about a 50-year-old, very experienced developer. He's got 30 years experience at the bank. He mentioned TN3270, which is green screen. He's very experienced with that. They have an apprenticeship program bringing up younger people who found his familiar world slightly discomforting, alien. It was not something they're familiar with, and he looked at the Zowe command line interface. Because the Zowe command line interface is open source, it was actually a project started by Broadcom. I think it was called Brightside at Broadcom at the time, anyway, when they very kindly donated it. Because it's open source and it's free, he was talking about getting high value at a low price. Okay, so the command line interface, I won't dwell too much on the demos. I'll just do a little bit of demo video clip. For those of you that haven't seen it, and Kip, I'm not sure if you've seen the CLI. So you type in the word Zoe, a bit like the GIF. It tells you everything you can do, and then you type in Zoe files and you do stuff with files. I'm not going to dwell too much on the video, but ultimately at the end of this, what you're doing is you're executing commands on the mainframe. Okay, so I'm at my terminal, I'm on my MacBook, I want to interact with the mainframe. I type in the word Zoe, it says, well, what do you want to do? It introduces the syntax of the language, and going ahead and for folks in the room that understand job control language, this is a piece of JCL and this little script, I submit. All of these videos, by the way, are embedded, so you can download them afterwards. That's the simple user experience that Stephen was looking for at Lloyd's. Where that's useful, and a lot of customers do this, is for ad hoc orchestration, because it's not just punching out the script and remembering it from your memory, but you can, typing out the command, you can script this up. So this is an example of a shell script. It's a Unix shell script. And this is a real shell script. And if you look at the top, I haven't got a mouse pointer, it says Zoe ZOS files list data set, but rather than being hard-encoded, we're getting environment variables. And then they're using the vertical bar, that's a pipe symbol, and then they're piping it to a jQuery library. jQuery is a very modern library that's able to take JSON, JavaScript object notation. They've got the dash response format JSON, and then they're able to query and iterate over that. So what you're doing is you're scripting using some shell script, using modern libraries like jQuery, and then using, I'm going to use the word legacy here, but you're talking to the mainframe in a modern way, because you say Zoe ZOS files delete data set, Zoe ZOS files create data set classic, that abstracts all of the difficulties about knowing, is it fixed block 80, how many cylinders, how many tracks and things, you have these shortcut keys. We have some old JCL in here, job control language. Job control language is as old as the mainframe. That's a sort of 58-year-old language piped right into the middle of shell script. We're submitting jobs. And what you're doing there is you're weaving together that tag phrase about all of the old with all of the new. And the skill level required to do this is such that you just have to learn the scripting language. And you can script within Python, you can script within any scripting language you want. Shell script's very, very popular. That's the Zoe command line interface. Two more things I'm going to cover, and then I'm going to go back to Stephen from Lloyd's. The Zoe command line interface is extensible. So if you think about the success of any platform, whether you're creating a video cassette, VHS or Betamax, whether you're creating a games console or a mobile phone with an app store, the success of that product is the success of the marketplace, the people that bring things to that market. A very good book written by called The Cathedral and the Bazaar that talks about that, the success of open source. So this is a list of all of the companies with their badges that have extended the Zoe command line interface. So there I was talking about Zoe ZOS files, jobs, that's basic. All of these vendor products, you are able to talk to a lot more of the ZOS ecosystem. And when you do that, it's actually backed by a lot of integration around authentication. You have common authentication. You have common ways that you can run this at scale. And this is just a quick list of little sort of piece of eye candy of all of the vendor products. And it covers CA Endeavor. It covers sort of IBM products in here. There's the Phoenix one that we saw back there. I think BMC have a product and things. So you have that vendor marketplace system. We good? Okay. And there's a really nice video clip that I wanted to play from Stephen again.
I did look at some other plugins that came along. I looked at with my automation background, I looked at their NetView plugin. They release these things all the time, and it's up to you if you want to take them on. You can just, because it's really only impacting yourself anyway on your laptop. So, but you can quickly get a new and good stuff. So that's what I did. And since then, I've developed other code that's running in VSC. All this is running on my laptop, you see. The only interaction with the mainframe is through the Zoe CLI. That is it. But the rest of it is running on my laptop. So, once a week when I come along to do when it's my turn and one call, I have to do the weekly rollout, I kick it off on VSC, I'll go downstairs, get myself a cup of coffee, get some toast ready, come upstairs, and my script is running in the background, and it tells me if it's worked or not. And I find that very, very neat, very, very nice. And again, you can. I did look at some other plugins.
Can you guys understand Stephen's accent or not? I'm British, so it makes a lot of sense to me. My wife's American. If she was here, she'd be like, I have no idea what he just said. Yeah, she's like watching it. Sometimes we watch movies in Scottish, and we have to switch the subtitles on because she can't actually understand. So what Stephen is saying there is that he, as a 30-year experienced system programmer, I think he talked about every weekend when he has to do some maintenance, he just has the script all set up. He executes the script from Visual Studio Code, which actually just lets you invoke script directly. You can create these things called tasks. And then he leaves it running, and he goes and has coffee and toast. So I love that. So that's one of the things that we've enabled customers to do at their weekends is to basically have more coffee and toast. But that's a very, very powerful story that we've got. The older, more experienced people are moving towards Zoe. I've been on many, many open source projects that have failed because they've said, we're just going to cater for the new. We're not doing all of the old with all of the new. It's very important for mainframe projects to succeed that they have to bring together the benefit of the platform with where the new form factors are going and get away from this two-phase IT. Okay. I'll just go a little faster for the act of time. The one thing that we can do, sometimes customers ask me and they say, they think that here we go. So Stephen writes a lot of REXX script. So this is REXX script. REXX script's running in a partition data set. I talked about those 30 or something vendor products. Within the command line interface, you can issue TSO commands. For folks here who know what TSO commands. Once you can issue a TSO command on the mainframe, you can do anything. You have the entire aperture of the mainframe available to you. So you're not gated by what that particular vendor has allowed you to do. That's a very interesting pattern that we've got, and this is a particular REXX script, and I'm just going forward here on this video, where I actually execute Zoe, TSO, issue command, execute REXX, and I'm running my REXX script there, and it's actually going to print the, I think the words to the Jabberwocky poem. If I go back here, you can see, and this is me goofing about, because I have the Jabberwocky poem in a data set. Okay, so sometimes customers ask me and they say, can I do something with a security manager? I had one the other day and they said, can I re-IPL my mainframe? And I said, for sure you can, because you can issue a TSO command to re-IPL the mainframe. There's nothing that you can't do through TSO commands on the mainframe. There are a lot more very finessed APIs that let you do things like look at jobs and talk to these vendor products. But even if you haven't got, if you only got a hammer, if you only got a tool and it won't fit what you're trying to do with it, TSO lets you do everything. Okay? So sometimes I call that TSO Unlimited. Are there any questions on that? Okay? So as well as those ad hoc scripting, the other thing that's interesting is on the platform, on Stephen's laptop, or whoever else that does this, I talk with many other customers that do this, one of the largest US retail companies, they're a huge fan of the Zoe command line interface, and what they've done there is they have older programs and older procedures, and they've deliberately rewritten them as REXX or job control language, where they can pass in arguments to those, and then so effectively what you've got is you've got older, more experienced programmers on the back end packaging things in a way they can be used with parameters passed to them, and then the newer people driving them through automation without having to know what they're actually driving. It's a bit like an API. If you think about an API, when you call an API, you don't really have to know what's on the back end. You just have to know the contract that you have. That's very, very popular with customers. Probably most customers I talk to, that's what they do. That's that journey of modernization. Now, as well as Stephen's laptop, the other thing that's very interesting is that laptop doesn't have to be a human, running jobs so that they can enjoy coffee and toast faster. There could be many other software products running on there, like Jenkins, very popular CI/CD tool. We saw Docker, Travis CI, and this is a screenshot of a Brazilian customer that I've worked with. I don't know if anybody from Kyndryl's in the room, but I work with them through Kyndryl a lot. And this is actually their live CI/CD pipeline that they gave me permission to use, but I haven't got permission to use their name. But you can see they have a Jenkins server, and they've got this great plethora of open source software, vendor software in there. It happens to be slightly tilted towards IBM portfolio, but I work with customers who use Endeavor, which is a Broadcom tool. I work with customers that use Changeman, which is a Micro Focus tool. So, but they've got ServiceNow, which comes from Atlassian. They've got Git. They've got Jenkins. They've got Artifactory, which comes from JFrog, SonyCube. And what they're basically doing is that scripting that we saw earlier, the shell script, is not just driving Zoe, but it's grabbing things from the mainframe, it's grabbing things from Artifactory, it's rolling them all together, perhaps doing some Git commits. It's a real command and control of mingling with all of their network. And that's a word that I got from the next customer I'm going to introduce, that he said the thing that attracted him and his company to Zoe, he called it utilize, mingle, and integrate. So the next person I want to introduce is Suresh. So Suresh works for Nordea. He's a director at Nordea. They're a huge bank in the Nordics. For anybody that's from Europe, the Nordics covers, Finland and Poland, Denmark, all that kind of sort of everything basically north of Germany, effectively within Europe. So let's have a look at see if I can listen to Suresh.
Takes almost a day to just check whether the job has run successfully or whether the file is available and stuff. So,
by the way, you guys okay with me playing this video? I'm just trying to read the mood of the audience. A lot of people, normally I'm used to people booing me or giving me more feedback about what's going on. So Suresh is describing the problem that they had at Nordea before they started to use Zoe. Okay, it's a little clip. I just want to play it. His word.
You spend a lot of time in this bureaucracy, and politics and bureaucracy kills companies, and we are here to break that bureaucracy, right? should not be any bureaucracy, and that is where we want to automate things, right? And that is where Zowe and ZOSMF and Zowe CLIs comes into picture. All these things we want to automate. So what we did was that we extracted all the requests. Mm-hmm. I asked all my team members to tell me, what do you do manually? And then we collected a list of backlog. And now we are working together with the ops and dev team to automate it. So what it will bring? It will bring down the wait times, let's say, which will increase the agility. And I'm more happier because I get what I want easier in few minutes rather than waiting hours. And I got to message the person like, hey, could you please respond to my ticket? Could you please look into my ticket? I don't need to do all this. So everything is automated. So for example, if I want to check the file name, I use Zowe CLI commands and ZOSMF, run a script in the backend. So here you go, you get an email in your mailbox. Yes, this is a file you asked for, and here is a file link. So you completely cut the bureau.
So what Suresh
takes almost a day to just check whether the job.
So what Suresh is describing there, he's describing, even though they're a very modern bank, they have 4 Z16s at Nordea, he's describing a process where it's the real, some people say DevOps is not about the tools, it's about the people. He's got a development organization and an operations organization, and there's a huge latency between the developers asking the operations staff to do things or the operations staff having any visibility about what the developers have done. And he's talking about the bureaucracy involved, and he's basically saying that Zowe CLI is the enabler that lets people write the scripts that bring those two together. So he's a director of the company, he's very focused on cost saving, he's focused on retention of staff, very focused on onboarding new people to Nordea, but they have a lot of older, people who are perhaps getting close to retirement. And I love that line that he loves it. There's a bit in there, the video, I don't know if any of you caught it, he said, and what happens is when things go wrong, people get an email. And I'm like, Suresh, I think we can go better. That's giving you like a B grade. I think and there's some really exciting stuff coming with Zowe Chat where we can get much faster notifications back. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to streamline and basically grease that process. Okay? Does that work? Okay, so those are 2 good customers. And that's one of the reasons why Zowe won the Best DevOps for Mainframe Solution Award. It beat 2 commercial solutions from IBM. I have the best job in IBM. I just get paid to do stuff that upsets IBM, the rest of IBM. But it's open source, so very proud of that. These are some great colleagues of mine at Kyndryl. Kyndryl are an independent company. They don't have to endorse Zowe at all. That's Gustavo. Zowe's been helping modernize the mainframe platform. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for sharing. We strive to have all our customers deploy Zowe in DevOps. It is the right strategy. Okay. So there's a lot of great validation there from the marketplace. And there was a quote I wanted to get from Cognizant as well. And I'm sorry, I just ran out, but it's the same basic message. And if you hang out on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of that resonating. Okay, so that's the Zowe command line interface. I'm just going to skip that video for the sake of time. Because I'm looking at my watch. The next thing that I want to talk about is Visual Studio Code. There's a plugin for Visual Studio Code. And I'm just going to go. What Steven says in this video is he basically says he downloads Visual Studio. He uses Visual Studio Code as well. Okay? So I'll just fast forward to Visual Studio Code and why that's successful. So Visual Studio Code is basically a modern way to interact with the mainframe without having to learn green screen, okay? In a little video clip, so John talked about the COBOL, what's it called? The Open Mainframe Project COBOL course. So John didn't call out Phil Murphy by name, but I can call it out by name because I'm British. I'm not worried about insulting Americans. Mayors or governors or whatever he is. But we saw during the pandemic, when the pandemic sort of started, there was this massive demand for COBOL skills. This is a company called Indeed, and they track COBOL job applications. And what you saw was a COBOL programming course. Now, the COBOL programming course is written to teach COBOL, not using those green screen interfaces, but it uses Visual Studio Code, and it uses the Zowe Explorer. This is Rune Christensen from Bank Data. We saw John talk about him a little bit in the keynote. I won't talk too much about this video clip, but what he says in this video clip was he gets all of the employees that are hired by Bank Data to use Visual Studio Code to learn the COBOL programming course. So it's not just... Sorry, I'll just go ahead. It's not just used by students, it's used by companies. And I see a lot of companies that do that. A lot of companies in the UK that I work with. They come to Domenico and myself and they say, I want to find out more about Zoe. And we say, well, how did you hear about Zoe? And they said, well, actually, our early hires came in from universities and walked around and said, why aren't you using the Zoe Explorer? Why are you using these green screen interfaces? Why aren't you using Visual Studio Code? And that's a great pipeline. It reminds me a little bit of when Microsoft 3.1, and those kind of grassroots movements sort of kind of took over that corporate world. And Rune is actually a real superhero, and I'm so pleased he was called out in the keynote because he's gone one stage further, and they actually open sourced the project that they had at the bank called COBOL Check. And that's phenomenal. I'll just scoot along now because of time. COBOL Fridays, I taught myself COBOL during the pandemic. I was at home, I was bored. And what was really nice was when you go into COBOL Fridays, they teach COBOL using Zoe Explorer, right? So they're not teaching Zoe, they're teaching mainframe skills, they're teaching COBOL. The fact they use Zoe is like, it's just, they chose it, nothing was forced by them. There's a training course called IBM Z Explore, it used to be called Master of the Mainframe. For 15 years, people were taught mainframe skills by IBM on green screen. They're all taught using Master of the Mainframe. There's some great quotes, and see if I can play this short video.
Just where I am. However, just submitting a job or looking at some output using the Zoe Explorer, a number of systems where I don't have to log on to TSL to do that because it's got my login credentials in the secure credential store. Is quite neat, and I hate logging on to TSL. And of course, I could just look at it, submit jobs, and look at the output very, very easily through the Zoe Explorer extension. Very nice as well.
So there's a nice validation. We got validation from Cameron. Cameron is at East Carolina University. He's talked about, what did he say? What used to be alien and suspect is engaging and compelling. It's a good time to teach the mainframe. So lots of great stuff, lots of success stories by getting the grassroots people, by getting education. It's something that the OMP lets us do with Zoe. It does really help. The third use case I want to cover is the developer. So behind, can you guys still hear me okay? Okay, behind the command line interface, behind Visual Studio Code, there's a lot of shared packages. They're written in Node and TypeScript. And they do lots of things like running at scale, authentication, making sure that people can only do what they're authorized to do and they can do it reliably and securely. Those Node packages are also available as an SDK, as a software development kit. There's actually software development kits in about 5 different languages. And the use case that's very interesting, and I'll just fast forward to, this is a very large Spanish bank that I work with. They have these in-house applications written using, I don't know what they've written, probably Kix or something, probably written in COBOL or BMS Map. They're modernizing all of their in-house applications to be web-based using the Zoe SDK. So the command line interface is one form factor, Visual Studio Code is another form factor, but you can take the underlying packages and just basically put, 1 minute, I've got my 1 minute warning. Thank you very much for that. So just show a few screenshots. I won't play that video. I just wanted to very quickly, I'm just going to get to the very, very end of this because I've sort of run out of time. I just wanted to play the very last thing from Suresh. And for me, this is the most exciting thing about open source and what Suresh is trying to do at Nordea. I'll let him have the last word.
I was also going through some of the other presentations, of course, today, and I was really impressed that many banks are also using Zoe and many organizations are using Zoe. So I was like, okay, we are on the right track. So we are also working with you on the things that really matter for mainframe. So that gives us confidence. And one more point, Joe. We also want to empower our, developers and operators working on production support, right? Rather than we creating everything, we want to implement Zoe and give them the access and to create everything that they want.
Again, just so I've run out of time, I'll just try and make the point he's making. What they're doing at Nordea is they are, because Zoe's open source and anybody can extend it and use it, rather than their developers having had to have a turnkey solution, he's enabling his IT staff to build custom things using Zoe to become more productive. You just don't have to get what Zoe ships off the shelf. And we're also working to try and get him, and there's one other company that I can't mention by name, it's the one that was 2 slides ago, they're going to start upstreaming some of those back. So we talked about the vendors that we have extending Zoe, but for me, a really interesting thing that we have in our event horizon is that IT staff are going to be empowered and then start using Zoe and upstreaming some of that stuff back into the open mainframe project. And that's really, really exciting.
I was also going through some of the other...
Sorry about this, I haven't got... That's the end, I'm just going to wrap it up. Thank you. Sorry about the technical problems. All right. Enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone.